I know that you've had a passion for electronics since you were a very young man. And can you give us an idea?
I was so lucky to grow up right in Silicon Valley, long before it was called Silicon Valley. It was Santa Clara Valley with the trees, and you'd ride your bike through to the orchards. And I grew up, as the world moved from tubes to transistors to silicon chips, I was in a group of engineering kids who had engineers for fathers. And luckily, due to my father's position in Lockheed, he was one of the few people in the world that was working closely with those companies, developing the latest transistors, the latest chips, the first chips in the world. I actually got to see pictures of. My dad would take me to shows, so I got to live through this whole revolution so close to it, and it was a lot of lucky things, not really intentional.
Now, how'd you get into actually building electronics? I know you did that at an early age.
Well, it starts out with the normal things. You know, my mom taught me flashcards, and I beat the girls in school, and they said, "You're good at math," you know, and so I decided in third grade I'm good at math. And then my father helped me with science fair projects that involved electronics, and some of those became very extreme in fifth grade, sixth grade. I had hundreds and hundreds of transistors and diodes nailed to a board to play tic-tac-toe, and I had no idea. I was learning all this stuff by accident. I discovered a manual in our hall closet. It showed computer logic. It showed computer mathematics. It showed computer parts called logic gates, how to hook them together and make bigger things. And I got interested in it. And I said, my gosh, you can do this in fifth grade. You don't need higher level math. You don't need geometry and trigonometry and any of that calculus. And I just decided, my gosh, these computers are the most extreme things you'll never see in your life, and yet they're easy to do, and I love them.
Now tell us about the first computers you got to work with.
Well, the first computers I got to work with, very hard to say because I never got to work with computers. We didn't have them even when I was in high school. I built my own computer projects, adders, subtractors with tons of transistors and diodes. I won an award in 8th grade, actually. I was one of those real sharp kids. I was smart in all the school subjects, and I was smart in electronics. And combine, mathematics with electronics, and you get engineering. And I won an award for the best project in the Bay Area Science Fair in electronics, and I was only in 8th grade, and they were judging me up to 12th graders. Oh, wow. So I was really advanced. Had my ham radio license in 6th grade, and I was doing all the tube stuff, where you solder every piece together to build your ham radio transmitter, your ham radio receiver, and tune the dials and your antennas on the roof, and so all this stuff was almost natural, but it actually extended out over period of, say, 15 years of learning. I mean, I had a long, long, long time to learn it all. Computers, although I fell in love with computers, I was too shy to ever go out and explore. What do you do? How do you build a computer? Where's a book? I want to learn about computers. So whenever I stumbled onto a manual or a book or something that mentioned computers, I just read it and drooled over it and started making diagrams on paper to try to see how these sort of things were done. And in high school, I discovered we didn't have computer in our high school. My electronics teacher said, most of the teachers say that education is in our school. What we have in the class, what we have in the school, that's what you get. Well, this teacher went outside, like a few teachers do, and got me to go down once a week to program a computer at Sylvania in Sunnyvale. And I would go down and write these programs, and it was just so much fun. The one thing I thought was a computer can do 1 million things a second. And humans could never, ever do that sort of thing. My gosh, what power I have in my hands. And I wrote a program to jump a knight around a chessboard and hit every square exactly once. And the program never finished, and I learned about loops. And I came back and I printed out the chessboards as it played, and I found out it was doing exactly the right thing to solve the problem, but it was going to take 10 to the 25th years, which is longer than the universe has existed. So I learned that day that, you know what, speed of a computer doesn't make the whole difference. You need smart approaches to solving these problems. Now, I didn't have a computer of my own, but I discovered a manual down at Sylvania called the Small Computer Handbook. It described the architecture of a computer. The architecture is like the architecture of a house. Say you had a diagram that described where the rooms were, where the doors were, where the cabinets were, and all this, and then you have all of the lumber pieces, and you know how to put them together very well and saw them into the right shapes. You could build a house out of lumber. Well, to me, the architecture of a computer described the computer basically, and then I knew the chips and the parts that made it, the logic gates from my science fair projects. So I started sitting down on paper, all alone in my room, not with my father, not with friends, not with teachers. Nobody else knew what this was. I just loved to figure out, how do you put these together to design a computer? So it was totally self-taught, no books or anything. And I tried it once, and it took many pages, and it wasn't complete and wasn't going to work. And I got an idea later on, and some better chips came out. And my father kept supplying me the better chip manuals as the chip companies developed better and better parts. And then I sat down and tried to design the computer again. And I got one designed, I thought, pretty completely. And then I learned how to get manuals for all the computers. I would go down to Stanford Linear Accelerator Center, because a lot of smart people work there. They always leave doors open. So I'd get into the library, I would get into the library on Sundays, and I would read computer magazines, and I could order manuals for computers. So I would order manuals for Hewlett-Packard computers, Varian computers, all these different models of computers, digital equipment, data general. And when the manuals came, eventually I would sit down one day and look at the architecture of the computer and use my chip ability, which was getting better and better, to combine the chips together that would make that computer. Now, after I got bored, this is going through my senior year of high school, I'm getting bored with nothing to do any weekend, I'll sit down and try to redesign the same computer with fewer parts. I made up the game. It was a challenge with myself. So I was competing with myself, and that's where I really honed my skills and got so good at it that eventually I was designing computers with half as many chips as you'd buy them with.
And tell us about the cream soda computer.
The cream soda computer came after my second year of college. I took off for a year to earn...